Supernatural Season 6. A nice experience, but at the same time, it was kind of a rough experience. Now, I need to remind you guys who have watched my other Supernatural videos that it has been a year and a half since I had seen Supernatural Season 5, but it's also been a couple of months since I've seen this season, so this video is not going to be up to par because I'm kind of off with some of my memories of the show and my memories of this season, okay? So, just a heads up. Now, I got to admit, though, even though it had been a long time since I had seen the show, I was able to get back into it fairly easily because the show did a good job of reminding me of events that had taken place in Season 5, so I didn't feel like the opening with Dean was that bad, and then, how they reintegrated Sam back into his life and all the discussions that they had. Those were good discussions, and it was nice seeing them play off each other, going through another bit while they're in conflict, blah blah, and how they brought back Mitch Pileggi. I gotta admit, I was actually fairly surprised about how they came about doing that, because it did seem like that the show was, trying to bring in more recurring characters a little bit better, which they kind of needed to do because a nice amount of the recurring people that happened in seasons 4 and 5 ended up getting killed off, although not all of them were killed off, but that seemed like a good move at the time. The show had tons of funny episodes, tons of horrifying episodes, and a nice amount of episodic and more longer story arcs, I gotta admit, but these are all the pros for this season, and I gotta admit, I honestly have a few more dislikes of this season, I think, than a couple of the others, even though I have definitely expressed negative thoughts about this show beforehand, particularly Season 4, so let's start jumping into some of those negatives, shall we? Well, I do feel like there was a good amount of episodic and longer story arc episodes in this season. It kind of felt like this season was constantly, in a cross balance, because, the first two seasons of this show were episodic, and while Season 3 did have a good amount of episodic bits, it also was starting to introduce story arcs that you just couldn't forget, or at least the characters couldn't forget, and then 4 and 5, even though there were more episodic or filler episodes in there, you nonetheless got the idea that the show had firmly established itself in the territory of having longer story arcs as its main bit. But here, it constantly seemed to jump back and forth a little bit. Now, I don't know if that's because they had a different team of writers, or if it's because I had been away from the show too long. I'll freely admit it could be me, but that's how I felt. That's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, it just kind of hurt the viewing experience a little bit. Also, you know how I mentioned that it seemed like the show was starting to do potential to bring back more recurring characters, like having Mitch Pileggi be resurrected, and then having all those cousins come, and then also having a couple more demon people, Crowley, Raphael, and his angel minions. Well, and Bobby's friend, Rufus, I think his name was. The problem is, though, almost all of these characters ultimately ended up only being used for a little bit, and then they all seem to just go, the writers, seem to keep going, oh yeah, we're going to get rid of them now, and almost all of them got killed off just like super easy. Now, I have in the past expressed a hidden desire, not in these videos, but in my mind, that I would like to see shows, start being more willing to kill off major characters, but the problem is, even though I'm seeing that happen, it happens so suddenly that I'm like, okay, these kind of feel like cheap deaths, and given how they went through two cycles of Mitch Pileggi having a falling out with Sam and Dean, him leaving them, coming back, and then they have to deal with him again, where he truly does die, that kind of got on my nerves, because I've seen a couple of other shows where they kind of did something like that, where it seems like a character dies, then they bring the character back, and then they have to deal with the character again in a totally unexpected way. Just that's not that fun, you know? I mean, like, the devs were good, and I was nervous, absolutely, okay? But it did get kind of annoying, at least for Mitch Pileggi. And then constantly trying to figure out where Kaz stood with the group. Now, I do like that he is taking more action for himself, okay? But the problem is, I don't really feel like he's doing it for good reasons, okay? Now, it could be that I'm merely not doing a good job of putting myself in his shoes, or Kaz the character, could not be doing a good job of articulating his feelings in the times that he is trying to, because he's stated repeatedly on the show that he has trouble doing that, but just like his whole motivation for doing all of this stuff, I just don't entirely get it, okay? I don't know if it's me not having experience with the show, I missed something, or Castiel truly didn't know what he was going to do, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, like, it is unexpected. Yeah, I'll give the writers props, okay? Because I never would have thought he would have done what he did right at the end there, okay? But, yeah. And I also kind of dislike how Crawley went out, because here's the thing, okay? In Season 5, he was the anti-hero character. Well, you get the idea that even though he's a bad guy, in a way you kind of like him, because he's willing to break all the rules, do his own thing, just let the world burn, you know, like Heath Ledger and The Dark Knight, but the way he kind of transitioned to here, just all of a sudden having like a master plan to suddenly control everything, that doesn't really strike me as his kind of person, because like, if he had absolute power, my honest reaction is he's the type of person who would get real dang bored of that power really quick. So, yeah, it just doesn't totally make sense. I mean, like, did he honestly want to get killed at the end or cause trouble for Sam and Dean because he seemed like he wanted the help of them? Just, I don't know. Maybe I don't get the character and all that kind of thing. I don't know. And one thing that's really been getting to me is that even though I do like the story arc of Sam, you know, not having his soul, wouldn't somebody have noticed a good darn ways before they confronted him on that issue? Huh? I mean, like, Kaz did kind of allude to that he might have known, but odd, huh? But you gotta remember, that's not to say that I didn't like the season. I liked it, okay? I'm just tempted to say that this isn't a bad TV season. It's more of a weaker season of Supernatural, but Supernatural is kind of like the James Bond movies in a way, where many people seem to say it's more of them just bad James Bond movies. As a movie, that okay, because for the vast majority of the Bond movies that people say not really liking or meh on, it's still your typical meh bits, you know, so 3 stars or 2.5 out of 5, that kind of thing. Oh, and one positive that I forgot to mention about this season, I do like how they brought back characters that happened a few seasons ago, because like that vegetarian vampire cult thing, I'm glad that they brought that up again, because I completely forgotten about it. And then there was also that person who helped Dean with death. That woman, I had actually forgotten about her also, so it's nice that they did try and do that bit. So, not all of the recurring character bits from previous seasons were bad, yeah. So, I get the idea that this might not have been the smoothest video, but you gotta remember, long time since I've seen this show, and this season is kind of different, you know? So if you feel like I'm kind of off on anything, please point it out to me, and I'll go back and try and refresh my memory on this stuff, alright? And I'm gonna keep watching this show. I definitely have an interest, trust me.